Ever wondered what it felt like to face a Spartan warrior in battle? These weren't your average soldiers playing dress-up. From bone-crushing spears to shields that doubled as weapons, Spartan warriors carried death in their hands and wore it like armor. And the most terrifying part? They trained their entire lives to use these tools with deadly precision. Get ready to discover the weapons that built the most feared military force in ancient Greece. Some will shock you with their brutality, and others will make you grateful you weren't born 2,500 years ago. Starting with number 10, let's talk about the Dory. When Spartans marched into battle, the first thing enemies saw wasn't their famous red cloaks or bronze armor. It was a forest of spear tips glinting in the sun, all pointed directly at their hearts. The Dory wasn't just a spear, it was a statement. At 9 feet long, this ashwood shaft, topped with a leaf-shaped iron or bronze point, could punch through armor, shields, and flesh with equal ease. But here's what made it truly terrifying. Spartans used it with one hand. While other warriors needed both hands to control their weapons, Spartans kept their shield arm free. This meant they could stab you to death while staying perfectly protected. The grip was wrapped in leather for better control, because when you're killing someone, you don't want the weapon slipping from your sweaty palms. The business end featured a broad, leaf-shaped head designed to slide between ribs and tear through organs. But the genius was on the other end, a bronze spike called the saurator, or lizard killer. When the main spear tip broke or got stuck in someone's chest, you flipped it around and kept fighting. In the famous phalanx formation, hundreds of these spears created a wall of death. Enemies charging at Spartan lines not only faced individual fighters, but they ran straight into a hedge of iron points, all thrust forward in perfect unison. The front rank held their spears level, the second rank angled theirs slightly upward, and the third rank aimed even higher. This created multiple layers of killing power that could shred through enemy formations like a meat grinder. And when the battle got messy, the Dory was still deadly. Its length gave Spartans a reach advantage over sword-wielding enemies, which let them kill from a safe distance while staying out of striking range themselves. Sliding into number 9, it's the Xiphos. But what happened when that 9-foot spear became useless? When the enemy got too close, or when your Dory snapped against someone's shield? That's when Spartans reached for their Xiphos, and that's when things got really ugly. The Spartan Xiphos wasn't like other Greek swords. While most warriors carried blades that were 18 to 24 inches long, Spartans deliberately chose shorter versions, just 12 to 18 inches of double-edged death. And the reason is that they planned to get close enough to their enemies to whisper in their ears before they killed them. This was all about efficiency. In the chaos of collapsed phalanxes, where shields pressed against shields and men fought breast to breast, a long sword was useless. You couldn't swing it and you couldn't even maneuver it. But a short Xiphos could slip between ribs, slide under armor, and find the soft spots that ended lives quickly. The leaf-shaped blade was perfectly balanced for thrusting. Spartans stabbed straight into the gut, up under the ribcage or across the throat. The bronze or iron construction made it light enough to use rapidly, but strong enough to punch through leather and mail. There's a famous story about this. When an enemy mocked a Spartan for carrying such a short sword, the Spartan replied, "It's long enough to reach your heart." And that was a promise. The grip was wrapped in leather or cord and was designed to stay secure even when covered in blood. Because once the Xiphos came out, then the blood was guaranteed. The weapon's balance and weight made it perfect for repeated stabbing motions. You could kill one man and immediately turn to face another without missing a beat. Taking cover at number 8, it's the Aspis. Here's something that might surprise you. The most important weapon a Spartan carried wasn't a spear or sword, but it was his shield. The Aspis was a bludgeon, a battering ram, and a symbol of everything Spartan society stood for. At 3 feet across and weighing 15 pounds, the Aspis was a monster. Multiple layers of wood covered in leather and topped with bronze created a surface that could stop arrows, deflect spears, and crush bones. The rim was reinforced and sharpened so it turned the entire shield into a giant circular blade. But the real genius was in how Spartans used it. The shield was strapped to the left arm with a bronze grip called a porpax and a leather cord, keeping it secure even if the warrior was wounded or exhausted. In battle, the Aspis became a weapon of opportunity. A shield punch to the face leads to a broken nose and shattered teeth, while an edge strike to the collarbone results in a crushed bone and a disabled arm. The weight and bronze facing meant that getting hit by a Spartan shield was like being struck by a 15-pound hammer. The psychological impact was just as brutal. Each Aspis was decorated with the Greek letter lambda, which was the symbol of Lacedaemon, the ancient name of Sparta. When enemies saw hundreds of these shields locked together, they were facing the entire Spartan state, unified and unstoppable. Spartans were told by their mothers to come home with your shield or on it. This was about the weapon's importance. A warrior who lost his shield couldn't fight effectively, but a dead warrior would be carried home on his shield and honored even in death. Holding the seventh spot is the Javelin. Before Spartans closed for hand-to-hand combat, they needed to soften up their enemies. That's where the Javelin came in with 5 feet of wood and bronze that could punch through armor from 50 yards away. Unlike the Dory, which was built for close combat, the Javelin was designed purely for throwing. Lighter wood, better balanced, and with a narrower iron point that could penetrate shields and armor. Spartans didn't throw these randomly, but they were trained to hit specific targets at specific ranges. The technique was deadly simple. As enemy formations approached, Spartan warriors would hurl their javelins in coordinated volleys. Hundreds of spears flying through the air, and all aimed at the same section of the enemy line. The goal wasn't necessarily to kill, though that was a bonus. It was to disrupt, wound, and demoralize. A javelin through the thigh meant you couldn't charge effectively. One through the shoulder meant you couldn't lift your shield. Even a glancing blow could knock a warrior off balance and make him easy prey for the Spartan phalanx that followed. The bronze or iron points were designed to stick. Once a javelin hit a shield, it was almost impossible to remove quickly. This meant enemies had to choose whether to drop the shield and fight defenseless, or keep fighting with a 5-foot spear hanging off their arm that would throw off their balance and make them clumsy. Spartans carried multiple javelins into battle, usually 2 or 3. The first volley would target the enemy's front ranks. The second would aim for anyone still standing, and by the time the third was thrown, the phalanx would be close enough that spears weren't needed anymore. At number 6, meet the weapon that looked like it was forged for fear, the Kopis. Some Spartans wanted more than just efficiency from their secondary weapons. They wanted to inspire fear, and for those warriors, there was the Kopis, a curved and single-edged sword that looked like death itself. Unlike the stabbing Xiphos, the Kopis was built for chopping. Its forward curved blade concentrated weight at the tip, which gave each swing the power of an axe, combined with the cutting edge of a sword. At 18 to the 25 inches long, it was bigger than the Xiphos, but still manageable in close combat. The design was borrowed from Eastern weapons, but Spartans perfected it for their own brutal purposes. The thick spine of the blade could crush bone, while the sharp edge could slice through muscle and sinew. The curved shape meant that even a glancing blow would slide and cut could leave devastating wounds. In battle, the Kopis was psychological warfare. The sound it made cutting through air was different, heavier and more menacing. When enemies heard that distinctive whistle, they knew they were facing a warrior who had chosen to terrify rather than simply kill. The weapon was particularly effective against lightly armored opponents. While the Xiphos was designed to find gaps in armor, the Kopis could simply chop through lighter protection. Leather armor, cloth padding, and even thin bronze couldn't stop a properly swung Kopis. Mounted Spartans especially favored this weapon. From horseback, the curved blade could reach down and hack at infantry, while the weight and design made it perfect for the sweeping strikes that cavalry combat demanded. Number 5 on the list is the Sarissa. For most of their history, Spartans stuck to traditional weapons, but when the world changed around them, they had to adapt or die. That adaptation came in the form of the Sarissa, a pike so long it redefined what warfare meant. At 16 to 20 feet long, the Sarissa made the Dory look like a toy. This wasn't a weapon you could use with one hand, as it required both hands and tremendous strength to control. But the reach it provided was incredible. Enemy warriors with standard spears couldn't even get close enough to threaten a Sarissa-wielding phalanx. The weapon came from Macedonia, part of the military revolution that made Alexander the Great unstoppable. When Sparta finally adopted it during the reforms of Cleomenes III, it transformed their entire way of fighting. The old, flexible phalanx became a rigid wall of pike points, which was nearly impossible to break through conventional attacks. The Sarissa's construction was a marvel of engineering. The shaft was made from specially selected ash or cornel wood, tapered to reduce weight while maintaining strength. The iron spearhead was smaller than the Dory's, but designed to penetrate armor through focused pressure rather than broad cutting. Using the Sarissa required completely different tactics. The first 5 ranks of the phalanx would level their pikes and create a hedge of points 20 feet deep. The ranks behind would angle their weapons upward, ready to lower them as the front ranks fell. This created a nearly impenetrable wall that could advance steadily and grind down any opposition. At number 4, let's talk about the Encheiridion. Not all Spartan weapons were designed for battlefield glory. Some were made for the moments when honor mattered less than survival. The Encheiridion was one of these, a little hand weapon that saved lives when everything else failed. Shorter than even the Spartan Xiphos, the Encheiridion was typically 8 to 12 inches of sharp and efficient steel. It was designed to be concealed, drawn quickly, and used in the tight spaces where larger weapons couldn't function. When the phalanx collapsed into individual struggles and when shields were lost and spears broken, the Encheiridion was the last line of defense. The weapon's name literally meant something held in the hand, and that's exactly what it was. A tool for desperate moments. Its short blade was perfect for stabbing upward into the armpit where armor was weakest, or sliding between ribs for a quick, silent kill, or cutting throats when stealth was more important than honor. Roman historians noted that many different cultures used similar weapons and suggested that the concept was nearly universal. But Spartans perfected it by turning a simple knife into a precision instrument of death. The blade was usually double-edged for maximum cutting power with a reinforced point for penetrating armor. The Encheiridion was the weapon that separated professionals from amateurs. Anyone could learn to use a spear in formation, but knowing when and how to use a concealed blade, that took experience, training, and the kind of cold-blooded thinking that made Spartans legendary. Coming in at number 3 is the Javelin. Some weapons are designed for battle, while others are designed for what comes after battle. The Javelin belonged to the second category, including a curved, sickle-shaped blade used for the grim work that followed victory. Short and wickedly curved, the Javelin looked more like a farming tool than a weapon of war. But its purpose was clear and to ensure that wounded enemies stayed down permanently. While the design varied, most were single-edged with a sharp inside curve that could slice through flesh and bone with minimal effort. The weapon's shape made it perfect for its primary function, beheading. The curved blade could hook around the neck and sever it with a single pull, much like a farmer cutting grain. This was a practical necessity. Wounded enemies could recover and fight again, but dead ones couldn't. According to Spartan records, the Javelin was also used for taking trophies. In a culture that valued martial prowess above all else, proof of victory was important. The weapon's design made it easy to collect heads, hands, or other evidence of battlefield success. The psychological impact was just as important as the practical one. Enemies who saw Spartans carrying Zieles knew that surrender might not be an option. These weren't for capturing prisoners, they were for finishing fights. Leading up to number 2, we have the Corinthian helmet. When enemies looked at a Spartan warrior, they didn't see a human face. They saw bronze death staring back at them. The Corinthian helmet was transformation and turned ordinary men into bronze-faced killing machines. Cast from a single piece of bronze, the helmet covered the entire head except for narrow eye slits and a small opening for the mouth. The nose guard, cheek plates, and curved design deflected blows while creating a face that looked more demonic than human. The horsehair crest on top made the wearer appear taller and more imposing. But the helmet's real power was in how it changed the wearer. Once that bronze face was lowered, the world became different. Vision narrowed to a focused tunnel, and sound became muffled. The warrior's breathing echoed inside the bronze, which created a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. This was sensory deprivation that created a battle trance. Distractions disappeared, and fear became distant. The only thing that mattered was the enemy in front of you and the weapon in your hand. The helmet turned soldiers into something beyond human, with focus, relentless and unstoppable force. The weight of the bronze also served a purpose. At several pounds, it required strong neck muscles to wear effectively. This meant that only properly trained warriors could use it in battle. It was a mark of status, training, and commitment to the Spartan way of war. In formation, hundreds of these bronze faces created a terrifying sight. Enemies saw a wall of identical death masks, all moving in perfect unison. The fear alone was often enough to make the enemy lose confidence before the fight even started. And finally, at number 1, we have bronze armor. Underneath the famous red cloak, every Spartan warrior wore another layer of protection. Bronze armor that turned his body into a weapon. This was to create a warrior who could fight longer, harder, and more effectively than anyone else on the battlefield. The bronze cuirass was molded to fit the human torso with ridges and curves that deflected spear points and sword strikes. The metal was thick enough to stop most weapons, but flexible enough to allow movement. Getting hit while wearing it was like being struck by a hammer, but the armor spread the impact across the entire chest, turning potentially fatal blows into bruises. Leg greaves protected the shins and calves, which were the parts of the body most exposed during the low, crouched fighting style that Spartans preferred. These were custom fitted to each warrior and molded to follow the exact shape of his legs. They were held in place by the spring of the bronze itself, gripping the leg like a second skin. The complete armor set weighed around 50 pounds, but Spartans trained with it from childhood. By the time they reached battle age, the bronze felt natural. Not a burden, but a tool that enhanced their fighting ability. The weight provided momentum for strikes, while the protection allowed them to fight with a recklessness that unarmored enemies couldn't match. The psychological effect was just as important as the physical protection. Bronze armor caught and reflected light, which made armored warriors appear to glow in sunlight. The metallic sound of bronze on bronze created an intimidating music that followed Spartan formations. Enemies heard them coming long before they saw them. The armor also served as a status symbol. Only full citizens could afford and were allowed to wear complete bronze armor. This meant that every armored warrior on the battlefield represented not just an individual fighter, but the entire Spartan state and its commitment to military excellence. These 10 weapons helped turn Spartans into legends. Each tool was designed for a specific purpose, from the long-range softening of javelins to the close-quarters brutality of the Xiphos. Together, they created a warrior who could fight effectively at any range, in any situation, and against any enemy. In the end, it wasn't the bronze or iron that made Spartans deadly. It was the man behind the weapon, who trained from boyhood, forged in war, and feared across the world. The tools were brutal, but the warrior? He was the true weapon. So if you had to face a Spartan warrior armed with these brutal weapons, which would you fear most? The crushing blow of the Aspis? The silent flight of the javelin, or would it be the bronze face of the Corinthian helmet? Staring at you with empty eyes that promised only death? Drop your answer in the comments. And remember that these weapons played a big part in building an empire and shaping a legend that still lives on 2,500 years later. When you think about what made Sparta great, don't just think about the warriors. Think about what they carried into battle and what those weapons could do in the right hands.